Previously on What Culture, Ash rounded up 10 games you should never play alone, including SCP Containment Breach, which still haunts my nightmares, the wildly underrated Layers of Fear, and phenomenal adventure The Cat Lady. We've got 10 more games that you may want a buddy for, lest they leave you shaking in your stylish yet affordable boots. And all these games are from your suggestions on our last video. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 more video games you should never play alone. Number 10. VISAGE. I'm not saying there's no scares in AAA games, but sometimes for the really scary stuff, your best bet is an independent studio. At least that's the case with VISAGE. Sad Square Studios' survival horror VISAGE came out of early access in 2020, and has been praised for being, quote, too scary, so you know we have to include it on this list. The game revolves around Dwayne Anderson, the unlucky soul trapped inside an ever-changing haunted house, whose previous inhabitants were driven insane, some committing murder or suicide. The game renders you defenseless, upping the survival horror ante, and much like Frictional's Amnesia games, you'll need to try and stay sane and avoid terror, lest you attract more gruesome, violent entities. The visuals are absolutely terrifying, and the realistic graphics don't help matters. Unless what you want is to have the crap scared out of you, then they help a lot. There's a good chance you'll have your heart absolutely pounding out of your chest playing this one, so best to bring a buddy. Number 9. The Calling. The Wii isn't exactly the gaming platform I'd immediately think of if I was looking for a scary game, but to the Nintendo platform we go for The Calling. Now, The Calling is far from a critically acclaimed game, but plenty of you pointed out that this one scared the pants off you when you were a kid, and probably not meant to be playing it. The game follows a premise similar to The Ring, where those who visit a website called the Black Page meet their death a short time after. You use the Wii remote to shake off ghostly enemies, and if you've got a particular fear of dolls, you're gonna have an especially bad time. This game probably won't scare you too much as an adult, but for some reason it's rated T for teen, and many of you as teens definitely didn't want to take it on solo. Interestingly, elsewhere on the Wii is survival horror game Ju-On the Grudge, so clearly I missed all sorts of things while I was sitting on my couch cheating at Wii Bowling. Number 8. Alien Isolation. Isolation is the name of the game, literally and figuratively, so it stands to reason you may think you want to play this one alone, although the fright levels may lead you to want a roommate, family member, or any other kind of human being at your side. What makes Alien Isolation particularly clever and frightening is that the titular alien's AI was cleverly programmed with a set of behavioral patterns that evolve as the game progresses. These mechanics keep the alien threatening, and keep you praying it didn't see you running for dear life into that locker. The alien is horrifying, the creepy working Joe androids are horrifying, and the persistent feeling of dread and tension makes Isolation way more than just a series of jump scares. Given how much of media in the horror sphere still seems to lean on jump scares, that's actually pretty damn impressive. I don't know about you, but I'd at least need the company of Twitch chat to get through this one. Number 7. Actual Sunlight. Remember how I said this video is a really good opportunity to put the spotlight on underrated horror games? Well, this one is underrated, but it's not a horror game. That said, I really don't recommend you play it alone. Actual Sunlight is a short interactive story developed by Will O'Neill. It's a game about crippling depression and its ripple effect through a life. Because of its heavy themes, it's not suitable for everybody, and you may not want to play this one alone, but it really is admirable as an exploration of a person experiencing a dire mental health issue. It's a theme that's so rarely explored in video games, especially away from the horror genre or in a mature light, and for that reason, it's worth checking out if you're into that kind of thing. If you're up for it, Actual Sunlight tells a really unforgettable and affecting story that will stick with you. But if you're not in the right place for it, just come on back to us here or head over to my Twitter and say hi and know that we're here for you, okay? Good. Number 6. Dead Space. Dead Space is a classic for a reason, and you guys wanted it on this list, so your terrifying wish is my command. Visceral's game may be getting old now, but it can still fully get the nopes flowing. Set in the year 2508 on a ship littered with infected corpses turned monsters called necromorphs, engineer Isaac Clarke has pretty much the worst time ever. The scene is already set for you to have a pretty damn scary time, but the devs weren't done messing with you. In the same vein as the Alien Isolation tricks, the Dead Space team implemented dynamic lighting and deferred shadows. In layman's terms, that means creepy shadows are more likely to freak you out when you're already on edge, just like in real life. The compelling plot, unsettling intimate environments, and tendency for enemies to pop up when you are pretty sure they're down makes this a survival horror masterwork. Number 5. The Suffering. The Suffering is a shooter, but don't let that lull you into a false sense of security, as there's plenty of spooky things going on here. The story centers on Torque, a prisoner who's about to be executed for murdering his wife and kids, though he doesn't remember committing the crime. The game follows him through his attempt to escape the island prison while battling violent supernatural entities and his own personal demons. Not only are the creatures genuinely creepy, the atmosphere is consistently tense, and the game deals with a number of heavy themes. In particular, almost every monster represents a different style of execution. The endings of the game also change depending on the choices you make as you go. Horrifying visions and creepy ambient noises go a long way into making this one just a little bit too unsettling to want to play alone. Number 4. Eternal Darkness, SANITY'S Requiem. Nintendo struck survival horror gold again with the psychological, terror-laden Eternal Darkness, SANITY'S Requiem. Touted as very possibly the scariest game on the GameCube, this 2002 classic was the first ever M-rated game published by Nintendo, so you've got a little history to go along with your spine-tingling horror adventure. The game features both Resi-esque gameplay mechanics as well as sanity effects. The game was well ahead of its time, and like many of the entries on this list, it delights in establishing a creepy, unsettling scene, far more than throwing endless jump scares your way. The Lovecraftian themes weave in with an excellent classic horror plot, deep lore, and some genuine well-earned scares to make it a serious contender for the game on this list, most likely to make you wish you weren't playing it alone. If you find psychological horror particularly disturbing, then this is a good one to go for if you're looking for a good old school fright. Number 3. Cry of Fear. Back in the day, I co-hosted a weekly horror stream, and Cry of Fear was one of the few games I did not look forward to playing each week. Clearly, I'm not the only one, as a bunch of you guys sounded this one off in the comments of our previous video. This phenomenal 2012 survival horror game began as a Half-Life mod, but instead of becoming a world-class FPS game like a different Half-Life mod, Swedish studio Team Psych-Scala decided to create one of the most unnerving video game experiences of all time. The game calls on the player to manage a tiny 6-item limit inventory and a tricky stamina system, all the while facing off against violent and horrifying foes in tight, uncomfortable, and bleak settings. The game never ceases in making you feel incredible discomfort and vulnerability, as it constantly throws strings of gory, threatening foes at you with limited means to manage the onslaught. If that doesn't sound tough going enough, the game also deals with some incredibly heavy themes. Suffice it to say, you aren't coming out of playing this one feeling good about yourself, or anything else, so do yourself a favor and at least do it with a friend. Number 2. F.E.A.R. There was some argument over which F.E.A.R. game should be represented on this list, but little argument that the series definitely needs to be here. So in honor of Armor being super scary, here it is. 2005's F.E.A.R. does a great job of combining a tense and atmospheric horror setting with some genuinely heart attack-inducing encounters and jump scares. There's a persistent sense of dread, particularly as the game is adept at surprising you. And, well, nobody likes getting stalked, especially not by a scary little girl. On top of that, commenter Jaded Crusader identified it's doubly as scary because the AI would try and flank you, which was fairly unusual of AI behavior at the time. There's enough scary crap directly in front of you. You certainly don't want to be spinning around checking all angles for extra scary crap. Honestly, quite apart from that, I'm impressed by any game that can give you a decent amount of firepower and still have you jumping out of your skin from a good scare. Number 1. Condemned, Criminal Origins. Of all the games we didn't include in our original list, Condemned Criminal Origins was the most requested, so here it is in our number 1 spot. This is a game you absolutely shouldn't play alone unless you're up for a really horrifying time. The 2005 survival horror from Monolith is not only infamously unnerving, it was straight up banned in some countries. The game follows SCU agent Ethan Thomas as he investigates a number of condemned buildings, seeking the person who framed him for murder. You frequently come face to face with the psychotically violent inhabitants of Metro, who are just as likely to attack each other as they are you, which is somehow just as, if not more, disturbing. It becomes clear something else appears to be driving the increased crime rate and brutality of the city's recent killings. Condemned Criminal Origins is wildly violent and never lets you get comfortable, no matter how familiar you become with its combat or world. In particular, the spine-chilling department store level with live mannequins is absolutely going to test your limits in noping out. Let me know down in that comment section if you can think of even more games you would not want to play alone that you would like to see included on this list. As always, I've been Jess from What Culture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. You can come say hi to me on my Twitter where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more content.